Hello everyone, welcome back to Tutor Series. My name is Shajahuddin and in today's lecture we're going to talk about BPH, that is benign prostatic hyperplasia. So before we go into the pathology of BPH, it's important to understand what is a prostate and what does it comprise of, right? So prostate is basically a organ that is present in males and it usually enlarges at the age of around 50 in male patients and causes benign prostatic hyperplasia. But if it's a carcinoma, then you end up having prostate adenocarcinoma at the age of around 70 years, and it basically pours out its it has a fluid that comes out with semen when a person ejaculates. So that is the importance of prostate in males. Now here we have two views of the prostate gland. So first let's look at this view. Now let's say this is the prostate and I cut it off from from the top, and then I look at it. So how would I look at it? This is what I would see in a prostate gland. So as you know that the urethra, when it escapes from your bladder, it passes through the prostate in males. So this is a prostate, and let's look at this view and understand the different zones, because when you understand these zones, that is when you can catch the pathology in BPH or prostate adenocarcinoma. But in today's lecture we're going to talk about BPH only. So this is a prostate. Now this red circle here, this resembles your urethra that is coming from the bladder, right? So this is your urethra. Just outside the urethra, inside your prostate, you have a periurethral zone, as I've labeled here. You have a periurethral zone just outside the urethra, circling it. Now after the periurethral zone, anterior to the periurethral zone, this green part is basically what is your transitional zone. Now this part that I've made in green is the transitional zone, and transitional zone is where your pathology lies whenever you talk about BPH. So this is going to be your transitional zone. Now after the transitional zone, anterior to it, you have the anterior zone. Now anterior zone usually does not have much significance because this zone is usually made up of fibrous stroma. So it usually does not have any pathology. But yeah, this is a zone, so you should know. So let's just quickly go through it again. This was your urethra. Around the urethra you had your periurethral zone. In front of the periurethral zone you had your transitional zone, which I mentioned is important when we talk about BPH. And anterior to the transitional zone we have the anterior zone made up of fibrous tissue. Now behind the periurethral zone, what do you have? Immediately behind it you have your central zone. Now central zone is comprised of usually stromal cells, epithelial cells, glands. And posterior to the central zone, that is usually covering the whole periphery of the prostate, is your peripheral zone. Now if you notice, in the center you have the urethra, periurethral zone, central zone, transitional zone. The peripheral zone is just in the periphery, this blue part. This peripheral part is what is called your peripheral zone. Now when we talk about the peripheral zone, this is important when we discuss prostate adenocarcinomas. So in these zones we just had two important things. Up rest were just the anatomy. Transitional zone important in BPH, and peripheral zone important in prostate adenocarcinoma. Now let's look at another view. Imagine this is your prostate, this is the person's prostate, and I cut it in half like this. First we cut it in half like this. Now we're going to cut it in half like this. So this is what we're going to see. Now above you'll have your bladder, and after the bladder you have your urethra coming, and this hole is your prostate, right? Now you would notice, then what is this? This is basically your ejaculatory duct that is going to come from your seminal vesicles that are going to be present here, right? You have your vas deferens seminal vesicles, and then you'll have your ejaculatory duct, and this is your prostate. So let's look at these similar zones over here in a view like this and see where do these different zones lie. So starting from the most easiest zones, if this is your urethra, just outside your urethra, what will you have? You will have your periurethral zone. So this is going to be your periurethral zone just outside the urethra. Now after that, what did I mention? That in front of your periurethral zone, what do you have? You have the transitional zone. So this part, this is going to be your transitional zone outside the periurethral zone. So urethra, periurethral zone, and then outside that you will have your transitional zone, this, and this is going to be your transitional zone. Anterior to the transitional zone, what did we have? We had the anterior zone. So this is going to be your anterior zone in such a view, which is going to be made up of your fibrous part. Now the peripheral zone. Peripheral zone, what did I mention? It's around the periphery. Over here it was around the periphery, right? Now since this view is different, where will you see the peripheral zone? Just over here, because if this was your prostate and you cut it in half, you're only going to see the peripheral peripheral zone over here, right? So this hole is going to be your peripheral zone, and in the prostate it's going to cover the whole prostate like this, right? It's going to line it, but since this is just half of the prostate, so this is your peripheral zone. And then after that you had your central zone. Now central zone was placed in the center only, it's not surrounding it completely. So over here you'll have your central zone. It's going to be like, you know, a curved structure, but since I have cut the prostate in half, it's only going to be present here with the peripheral zone covering the whole prostate, central zone in the middle, transitional zone, periurethral zone, and your anterior zone. So these were the two views where I discussed about the different zones of the prostate. You're supposed to know these zones a bit, and the zones that are important in pathology are your transitional zone and your peripheral zone, where the pathology lies in either BPH or prostate adenocarcinoma. Now, since we've discussed the anatomy, let's talk about the pathogenesis that happens in a patient of BPH. So, like I said, our prostate is made up of epithelial cells and stromal cells, right? So, what happens is that the main androgen in a male is testosterone, right? You have testosterone filled up in males, right? So what happens is that when you have these stromal cells and epithelial cells, the testosterone hormone is going to come and act on your prostate. Now what it's going to do is, I'm going to write these two cells here. First you have your stromal cells. Now, what happens in stromal cells is that you will have testosterone come inside them, right? Testosterone is going to come and act on the prostate, and in the prostate you have stromal cells, so it's going to come in the stromal cells, and over here you have your prostate. Now, in stromal cells you have a special enzyme, and that enzyme is called your type 2 5-alpha reductase. 5-alpha reductase. Right, now testosterone is going to act on type 2 5-alpha reductase, and 5-alpha reductase is going to convert testosterone to DHT. Now what is DHT? DHT is basically your dihydrotestosterone. Now when we talk about the prostate, testosterone and dihydrotestosterone are basically the two hormones that, like, you know, come into action in a prostate. DHT is more potent in the prostate because when we talk about the receptors, the androgen receptors in the prostate, DHT has a higher, like, you know, affinity towards those receptors, which is why DHT is much more potent compared to testosterone, which is why it is a natural phenomenon that when it comes to the prostate, the testosterone is converted into dihydrotestosterone via type 2 5-alpha reductase that is present in your stromal cells. We haven't talked about the epithelial cells yet. Now, in the epithelial cells, you lack type 2 5-alpha reductase. You have this enzyme in the stromal cells, but not in the epithelial cells. So what happens in the epithelial cells? Let's talk about that. So over here, you have your epithelial cells. Since they don't have the enzyme, what stromal cells do is that they convert all the testosterone to dihydrotestosterone, and then they keep half of the dihydrotestosterone to themselves, and they give half of the dihydrotestosterone to your epithelial cells. So now you had one enzyme that was type 2 5-alpha reductase just present in these stromal cells. What does this enzyme do? It converted testosterone to DHT. Now this DHT was present in stromal cells, right? Epithelial cells were lacking this enzyme. Now what to do? Stromal cells donated DHT to epithelial cells as well. So now you have DHT present in both stromal cells because that is where it's being produced, and epithelial cells because stromal cells give a bit of DHT to epithelial cells as well. Now since both of these cells have DHT present in them, they also have a androgen receptor. So both of these cells are going to have a androgen receptor present inside of them. DHT is going to come and bind to the androgen receptor. Why? Like, why is DHT binding and not testosterone? Like I mentioned, DHT has a higher affinity, which is why it's more potent compared to testosterone. When it acts on the androgen receptor, you have obviously, like, you know, you have replication going on, and then what happens is that these androgen receptors are going to make two things. They're going to make TGF beta, and they're going to make fibroblast growth factors. They're going to make these two things. Now, the importance of these two things is that when you have fibroblast growth factor being made in the prostate, fibroblast growth factor lead to proliferation of the embryonic tissue. Like when a child is born and when the child basically is inside the mother's womb, so the prostate is being made, like there is a embryonic prostatic tissue that is being made, and FGFs are responsible for that production. Now obviously in an adult, when you have all of this going on in an uncontrolled manner, DHT is going to act on the androgen receptor is going to produce TGF beta and fibroblast growth factor. Fibroblast growth factor is going to lead to increased proliferation of your prostatic tissue. What is TGF beta going to do? TGF beta is going to lead to proliferation of your fibroblast and your mesenchymal cells. So in turn, what are these two doing? They are increasing your prostatic tissue. Increase in your prostatic tissue, either by increasing your mesenchymal cells or your fibroblasts, or leading to increase in fibroblast basically your prostatic tissue via fibroblast growth factors. So either way you have increase in your prostatic tissue. Now if this was your prostate and you end up having increased prostatic tissue production inside this prostate, what's going to happen? It's going to enlarge, right? Obviously you had a sustained growth going on, and then all of a sudden the whole balance is ruined. Your prostate is going to enlarge. When that prostate enlarges, the reason why you have symptoms is the urethra is passing between the prostate, right? So when this prostate is going to enlarge, it's going to compress the urethra. Like obviously if you have tissue all over, it's going to grow in the periphery as well as in the center as well. So what's going to happen is the tissue is going to grow over here and it's going to compress your urethra. When you have a compressed urethra, that is when the patients start having symptoms, right? So we'll talk about the symptoms a bit. So what's basically happening here, that you have increased prostatic tissue, right? You have increased cellular proliferation. Now one thing that is believed to contribute to BPH as well is that you have increased growth, but along with increased growth you also have reduced cell death happening inside your prostate. So reduced cell death, increased proliferation, so both of these are going to contribute to what? Increased prostatic tissue, leading to your prostatic enlargement. Now this happens in BPH, and like I said, that all of this gets targeted to which zone? It gets targeted to your transition zone, over here and over here. Now like I said, the urethra is over here, and just anterior to your urethra you had your transition zone. So if you have increased growth over here, it's eventually going to compress the urethra in a while, and the patient is going to have symptoms. Now if you have increased growth, it could either be glandular in nature, or it could either be just a fibrous tissue that is growing. So if you have nodular hyperplasia that is glandular in nature, so when you examine the prostate, like if the morphology would be under a microscope, that you would see pink discrete granules, you would see soft tissue present inside the prostate. That would ensure that the nodular hyperplasia is glandular in nature. But if it's pale in color, it's white, it's hard, it's not soft, that would mean that the nodular hyperplasia is fibrous in nature. It's hyperplasia in either case, be it fibrous or glandular. But yeah, there are two different types, glandular and fibrous, so you can observe that what's the difference between them under a microscope. Glandular is going to be soft, pink, while fibrous is going to be hard, pale, white in color. So this was basically the pathogenesis of BPH. Now coming on to the clinical features. Now clinical features are going to be specific to what? The patient is going to come with urinary complaints, because like I said, you have your urethra passing through the prostate. So if your urethra is going to compress, it's only going to give you urinary symptoms, right? So the patient is going to come to you with complaints of pain. Like they're simply gonna say that I have pain while I'm micturating. So you will have pain, and the medical term would be to say dysuria. Dysuria would be the right word to say. Now, since you have a constricted urethra due to increased prostatic tissue, what's going to happen is that due to reduced urine flow to the urethra, what is above the urethra? You will have your bladder, right? So your bladder won't be able to empty itself just like it does in a normal human being, because in a normal human being you have a normal pathway. Over here you have a small urethra due to increased prostatic tissue, so the bladder won't be able to empty itself. So you will have a increased size of your bladder, you will have distension of your bladder, and you will end up having a distended abdomen. So bladder distension, the patient's bladder is going to be full most of the times. They're going to say that I feel that my bladder is full. Now, apart from that, the patient won't be able to urinate fully. Like, I mean, if you have a narrow urethra, not all of the urine will pass. Yes, a bit of your urine might pass, but the patient might not be able to empty their bladder fully. So if they can't empty their bladder fully, they'll have to go multiple times and empty their bladder in small amounts in order to completely empty it, right? I mean, that makes sense. A normal person is going to go once and empty their bladder. A patient with BPH will have to go multiple times, urinate in small amounts because they can't urinate fully. So they're going to urinate in small amounts to remove, empty their bladder fully. So what would they have? They will have increased frequency. Their frequency of micturition is going to increase. Apart from that, these patients will have to wake up at night 2 to 3 times because they might have to micturate. Like I said, they can't empty their bladder fully, so they have to wake up multiple times to do that. So they will have nocturia. They will have to wake up in the middle of the night to empty their bladder because they would feel like they have to go. Now, they might have difficulty in starting and stopping their urine. So difficulty in starting or stopping. Now, why would they have difficulty in starting and stopping? Like I said, a narrow urethra, they will have to apply a lot of pressure, apply a lot of pressure in order to empty their bladder. So they will have difficulty in starting, and once it has started, they might not be able to control it right there. They will have difficulty in stopping the stream. Apart from that, since you have a narrow urethra, they won't have a proper stream of urine like a normal person. So they will have a weak stream of urine. Weak stream of urine is going to be present. They might have dribbling, that is drops might come out, so they might complain of dribbling. So these are basically a few clinical features that you might see in a patient of BPH. And like I said, that they will have a distension of their bladder. You might see a distended abdomen. Now, taking a biopsy is usually not the case because you can't just go to the transition zone and take out a biopsy sample, and you can't really notice that on BPH on biopsy. So for BPH, what you can do is that you can do a abdominal ultrasound. When you do a abdominal ultrasound, what would you see? You're going to probably see enlarged kidneys, because BPH is a common cause of hydronephrosis. So you can have hydronephrosis in your kidneys, and you can also have a distended bladder, which might clue you that the patient might have BPH. And apart from that, one thing that would be common in all patients of BPH is that when they come to you and when you're going to take their history, so in the history, the first thing that you ask is, what's your name, what's your age? So the age that a patient of BPH is going to have is greater than 50 years. So keep that in mind. Greater than 50 years of age, BPH. Greater than 70 years of age, prostatic adenocarcinoma. So these age limits are really important when it comes to BPH. So coming on to the treatment. Now, you have medical treatment, you have conservative treatment, and you have surgical treatment for patients of BPH. So talking about the conservative treatment, what you can do is you can suggest the patient that do not drink increased amounts of fluid when you're about to go to sleep at night to prevent nocturia. If they don't drink water before going to sleep, they might not have to go. Secondly, if they reduce alcohol consumption and if they reduce their caffeine intake, because these two have an effect on urination, they tend to make a person urinate more often with increased frequency. So if they cut down on their alcohol and their caffeine, they might be able to improve their symptoms regarding frequency. So frequency and nocturia are taken care of. Apart from that, if they improve their voiding habits, if they try to empty their bladder more often, they make a schedule of their voiding habits, so that might be able to regulate their symptoms. Apart from that, coming on to medical therapy, what you can do is you can give the patient tamsulosin. Now, what is tamsulosin? Tamsulosin is basically a alpha 1 blocker. It is basically a alpha 1 blocker. Now where does Tamsulosin act? It acts on your prostatic muscles. So Tamsulosin is a alpha 1 blocker. When it acts on your prostate, what it does is that it relaxes the prostatic muscle. So if it's going to relax the prostatic muscle, it might be able to help the patient, it might be able to relieve the pressure on the urethra, and the patient might have alleviated symptoms due to use of Tamsulosin. In fact, I just observed a patient coming to the OPD today. So the patient had BPH, and when he was given Tamsulosin, he said that his symptoms had improved. So you can give them alpha 1 blocker for symptomatic treatment to take care of these urinary symptoms. Now, apart from the symptomatic treatment, if you want to handle the disease, target the disease, what you can do is, now think about it. How did the whole trouble start? Testosterone was converted into DHT, right? And I said that DHT is really potent. So if there were a way to reduce DHT, it would not go to androgen receptors, because testosterone can't go to androgen receptors. It does not have a high potency. So reducing DHT is going to reduce everything. Now, how can I reduce DHT? Think about it. How can I? If I do something to this enzyme, I can reduce DHT, right? So if I give a drug that blocks the action of type 2 5-alpha reductase, I can reduce, I can, probably treat BPH, right? So giving a 5-alpha reductase inhibitor, one example of that is finasteride. I'm going to write that down here, finasteride. Now, finasteride is a drug that blocks type 2 5-alpha reductase. You can't convert testosterone to dihydrotestosterone, and you end up having a better condition in a patient of BPH. Now, coming on to the surgical treatment. In surgery, you have a treatment called TURP, that is your transurethral resection of the prostate. What happens is that you go via the urethra, and what you do is that you remove this transition zone. You go through the urethra and you remove the transition zone in a patient of BPH. Now, keeping in mind, you're just removing the transition zone, you're leaving the anterior zone, central zone, peripheral zone all in place. You're just removing that one zone that affects the patient of BPH, right? So one thing to keep in mind, a patient of BPH who has undergone TURP has gotten their transition zone removed, they can still end up having adenocarcinoma of the prostate. Why? Because their peripheral zone is still present. In TURP, I just removed the transition zone, right? So if the peripheral zone is still present, and he's a 50-year-old, in probably 20 years, when he reaches the age of 70, he might end up getting prostate adenocarcinoma as well. So TURP is just a treatment for BPH, but it does not prevent a person from developing adenocarcinoma. So this was basically a quick, brief lecture on benign prostatic hyperplasia, starting from the anatomy, the brief pathogenesis, and the clinical features, and a bit about its treatment. So I hope you guys understood what BPH is. It's really common in males. Like I said, a patient with greater than 50 years of age with these symptoms, the first thing that should come to your mind is the patient might have BPH. So thank you so much for watching. I hope that you were able to understand the whole concept. Stay tuned and keep watching XME Medical.